Ford has just unveiled the new Ford F-150, and I think that the design changes that they made for the 2024 model year, it's really good by the Ford design team because it makes it feel even more static than what it did than it did before. So in this video, I want to take a look at this new Raptor and compare it to the TRX, and I'm gonna let you know which one I would personally buy. The pricing is gonna have some impact on this, but I'm gonna focus, as we always do here on the channel, on the design. But before we jump in and have a look at the front, side, rear, and the interior of the Ford F-150, the 2024 model year, and the TRX, let's have a look at some of the spec and tech here. So the 2023 Ram 1500 TRX, it starts at $87,000. I want you to keep this in mind when we have a look at the pricing of the Raptor R, which this is the comparable to. We gotta have the V8 versions of both of these trucks. So you have a 702 horsepower, 6.2 liter supercharged V8, and this is faster than a Porsche 718 Cayman GT4 0 to 60. It's done in just 3.7 seconds. Pretty incredible how fast you can make these trucks today. You have a bunch of options here, as you can see. Even if you're paying $80,000, it's still a lot of truck for the money. You have a heated steering wheel, for example, and heated front seats that cost extra. I think heated front seats should definitely be a standard feature for an $80,000 truck. Very interesting to see that that is an option. You can also have it as a flat bottom steering wheel, lapped in leather and micro suede, which is something that I would definitely want to have because it feels nice to grip and it also looks very cool. So it has 702 horsepower and 650 pound-feet of torque, which is sent to all four wheels, obviously, through an 8-speed automatic transmission. It's got beefed up suspension, and 35-inch tires is standard on the TRX. You can't get it as you can in the Raptor with 37-inch tires. You only get the 35s here from Ram. You have 18-inch wheels and 11.8 inches of ground clearance, which is not bad at all. Towing capacity is 8,100 pounds, which is a little bit less than the Ford F-150 Raptor. Now the MPG here, keep in mind this is a 6.2 liter supercharged V8. You get 10 MPGs in the city and 14 highway. So if that's a worry, if fuel economy is a priority for you, I don't recommend going with either the TRX or the Raptor R. You have leather covered surfaces and a mix of micro suede and carbon fiber accents in the interior, and of course this flat bottom steering wheel, and you also have some pedals in the interior. You can see those right here. Pretty big pedals, which I appreciate when they have. If you're gonna have pedals, make them properly big. And here you can see this micro suede flat bottom steering wheel as well, looking fantastic with a 12-inch infotainment system. It also has physical knobs and buttons, as you can see right here on the side of the infotainment screen. So the climate control settings and all of that, you can do that either through the infotainment screen, or if you want to, like I do, you can use physical buttons for it. Now let's compare this to the 2024 F-150 Raptor. So this just looks fantastic. By the way, I also think the Ram TRX looks fantastic. When I was shopping for a truck myself, I actually went for the Ram Rebel just because I liked the design of the Rebel better than the F-150 at the time. But now it's getting a little bit more tricky with this new update because this looks really cool. So Ford is updating the F-150 Raptor for 2024 with new headlights and a few new features. The V6 powered Raptor and the supercharged V8 powered Raptor R models continue. The new units are meant to improve rebound control, which Ford says will help with high-speed desert running and on-road ride quality as well. All the good new features are available on the Raptor models with the 37-inch tires, and I do like that you can get it with 37s from factory. I think the F-150 just looks fantastic with the 37-inch tires. The color palette expands to include shelter green, and there are new hood graphics available as well. Now the pricing here. So you can get the base Raptor, the V6 Raptor, for $78,720, and that is more in line with the base TRX, and that is where it gets very tricky because the Raptor R, that is a 700 horsepower Raptor, and in power and engine size is more comparable to the TRX. You have to pay almost $110,000 as a base price for the Raptor R compared to $87,000 for the TRX. But let's talk about the design here. So let's jump into Photoshop and have a look at these two beasts. So up top we have the brand new 2024 Raptor, and this is not the Raptor R, but as you know, the Raptor R is looking almost identical to the V6 Raptor, so the design comparisons is still going to be valid. We have this line now. We have a clear framing of the top graphics, and as you can see, the headlights here, the LEDs inside, got a lot more static for the 2024 model year compared to the previous one. I made a video comparing those two as well here on the channel, and I also love the Raptor lights, as they're called. These lights in the middle, the position lights that you need to have if your truck is wider than, I believe, 80 inches, which both of these are, so regulations say that you need to have some lights in the middle. And then we have this separated piece at the bottom, which is the bumper with the massive skid plate underneath, looking very industrial. And comparing these two designs, I think the Ford is more the industrial structured design, comparing it to the more organic, soft, the more stylized front end of the TRX down here. I still love this design because I love how this piece, you can see the front end, the face of this sort of sticks out from the hood itself and creating this almost additional face that's extrudes from the sheet metal of the hood. We have a nice chamfer going around here, and this is what I'm talking about when I talk about the styling. We have a lot more curvatures here and more wing, sort of a wing of body panel underneath the headlight, creating a nice framing for it. And I also like that the headlights, in this case, they're more horizontal. So you see just how tight these two headlights sit. And what this does visually is create a much wider feel for the front end of the Ram than if you look at the F-150 up top, which has more vertical setting for the headlight unit up top here. And by the way, I also like this Ford grille with the Ford letters stamped into the grille itself. And you also, as I said, this is wider than the 80 inches, so you do need to have these Raptor lights somewhere in the TRX, or these position lights. And what Ram did is that they hid it in this intake right here. So if we zoom in, you have the same 3 position lights right there integrated in the hood. The hood design itself, you can see just how much more styling and fluid surfaces we have on the TRX, which looks fantastic, and compare that to the more static lines that we have on the Ford. So I do like that we have two pretty much completely different design philosophies comparing the Ford to the Ram. You also have a pretty beefy skid plate, metal skid plate underneath down there. The bumper itself of the Ram looks more like a integrated part of the overall design compared to Ford's, which looks like a more, again, industrial and functional piece, specifically for the Raptor, comparing it to the TRX bumper. Now, looking at it from a side view, and this is where I think both of these trucks, I think these are the two best looking trucks now, half-ton trucks out on the market, is the Ram TRX and the Ford F-150 Raptor. We have very clean lines, static lines here again in the Ford F-150. We have some line flow right here, cutting in to the rear end, the bed part. We also have this greenhouse in typical Ford F-150 fashion, with this dip and a nice chamfer going underneath this dip and then continuing in the passenger window. And this, as I've said before, is going to give you great visibility when you have this window piece sticking down, further down, giving you a clearer visibility to where the front tires are. Overall, a fantastic looking truck with the classic 3-box design that we want to see in big trucks like this. You also have a nice taillight graphics, which we're going to have a look at in just a second. One detail I love with the Raptor is this bed section, and specifically in this case we have the graphics, because we have almost like a triangular piece fold in the in that section. We also have the same piece coming back in the front fender right here. As you can see, this triangular piece to add more width to the overall design of the truck. And I do believe that these are actually the 37-inch tires. You can compare that to the 35s that we have on the TRX. Now the TRX, again, it feels more fluid, more rounded. We have a much more rounded greenhouse here than we have on the Ford F-150, specifically in this area right here. Let's make it green so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. And then we have a clear shoulder line that cuts from the front fender into the greenhouse and then sort of continues slightly into the bed section of this truck. And I also love this section on the TRX as well. Instead of having it be more industrial and more defined, the width, the added width on this truck, it now feels like this is bulging out and creating a very nice wide fender in the rear end. And you can see that clearly when we look at the rear end with this added width right next to the housing for the taillight. Further down, we do have this being in two-tone, which I'm not a huge fan of. I would much rather have this be in body color, which you can do with the TRX if you want to, and that's something that I would definitely go for. And then you have the beadlock wheels and the 35-inch tires here. Again, I kind of want to have 37s on the TRX because proportionally, I think 37s on a half-ton truck just looks perfect on these type of vehicles. Looking at the rear end here, so we have a pretty big update from Ford when it comes to the taillight graphics, and again, it just became a lot more static and industrial, and I think that overall suits this type of vehicle to have this type of styling in it. And here you can see this typical Raptor chamfer that we have even since the first generation Ford F-150 Raptor, where you just add extra width to the truck, and they didn't bother integrating it in a smooth way. Instead, they just add this big chamfer. We have that both in the front as well as in the rear. You can see that big chamfer here in the front end as well, coming back in the rear end, adding some very cool chamfers and framing for the taillight graphics. And again, we have the Ford letters stamped, embossed into the tailgate itself. Dual exhaust, exactly what I want to see on this, and you also have it on the Tremor. Other Raptors have the exhaust sticking out right here on the side. I definitely prefer it to have dual symmetrical exhausts like we have here, and you can clearly see the triangular piece that we talked about in the rear fender coming back in this view as well, pretty well defined. Now looking at the Ram TRX, you can see that how different they integrated the added width, because this is a lot wider than just a normal Rebel. But I think the integration here is a lot smoother than what we have in the Ford F-150, and that is not, it's not a bad or a good thing to have it like this, because you can see that we have added width here. Instead of having a chamfer, they added this plastic piece going around the taillight to kind of melt the added width smoothly into the taillight graphics. One detail I love about the Rams is this line at the bottom. It used to be, in the previous generation, this line used to be just a straight line. Now they added some styling to this with this dip in the middle as it goes underneath the Ram logo, looking fantastic. Further down, we can see we also have dual exhausts on this design, and a lot smoother design overall in this curvature up here, comparing it to the very sharp chamfers up top on the Ford. Last but not least, let's have a look at these two interiors. I don't know about you, but I still think that the Ram interiors, even though it came out in 2019 essentially, it still looks very modern, because we have a big 12-inch gauge infotainment screen. We also have a big screen right here integrated pretty nicely in the Ford F-150. Not so sure I like this red steering wheel that we have in this specific Raptor right here. But as you can see, the exterior design comes back here in the interior as well. So it kind of depends. Do you prefer to have more of a fluid design on your half-ton truck, or do you want to have more of a static design overall and vibe of your truck? It depends on which design approach you want to go with, and Ford and Ram has both of these covered for you, so it's essentially up to you which type of styling you prefer. But I do like that we have a gauge cluster that still, thankfully for the 2024 model year, still has a clear solid housing for it, a cave down here. Everything is digital, as you can see, which is totally fine as long as we have it be integrated nicely in the design, which we have here. And having this static feel makes it a lot easier to integrate a big screen like this. And overall, it's just a fantastic looking interior by Ford. And the same goes for the TRX. The main difference here is where I think you can see the age of the Ram a little bit more, is that we do have analog gauges for the tachometer and the speedometer, but we still have a big display, a relatively big display in the middle of the gauge cluster, and of course we have a nice housing for it. So I think it doesn't really matter to me if we have either a fully digital gauge cluster like we have in Ford, or these analog tachometer and speedometer like we have in the Ram, as long as we have them be properly integrated, which both of these are. I definitely prefer this steering wheel over the Ford steering wheel. I think the Fords look a little too basic for me. This feels a lot more high-end for some reason. Maybe it has to do with this suede feel that we have in the bottom, and also the flat bottom steering wheel. I don't think we have that on the Ford Raptor. Still, Looking at these two interiors, you can definitely see which one is the more organic feel, which one is the more industrial feel with these static lines on the Ford. Then you have some curvatures here on the Ram, for example, up top here, going into the center console as well. So which one of these would I personally buy? So as we talked about the pricing, it's not going to have a big factor because that's not what we're focusing on here. It's more about the design. But if I were to actually buy it, I would probably still go with the TRX because it costs $87,000 for a base TRX, and the base Raptor R is $110,000. That's a huge gap between these two, and they have very similar performance. They both have around 700 horsepower, but when it comes to the design, I would honestly pick the Ford F-150, the 2024 model year, and the updates that they did to this design. I just think they nailed it and hammered in more. They went more towards the industrial feel and really nailing that sort of vibe for the Ford F-150.